Excuse me, sweetheart. The gift shop is 2 buildings over back near the main gate. The voice cut through the low hum of conversation inside the tiered lecture hall like a serrated knife. Molly Peters paused, her hand hovering over the back of a sterile gray chair in the front row. She didn't flinch, nor did she immediately turn around. She simply took a breath, smelling the familiar mix of floor wax, stale coffee, and the sharp starch of uniforms. She was wearing a royal blue blouse that contrasted sharply with the sea of olive and tan tactical gear filling the room. Her long blonde hair was loose, cascading over her shoulders, but it was her arms that had drawn the attention of the man speaking. Her sleeves were rolled up to the elbows, revealing dense, intricate inkwork that wrapped around her forearms. Dark, geometric lines interlaced with shadowing that vanished beneath the blue fabric. Molly turned slowly. Standing in the aisle above her was a man built like a vending machine, wearing the Type 3 Navy working uniform. The insignia on his chest identified him as a chief petty officer, and the trident pin, the Budweiser, glinted dully under the fluorescent lights. He was chewing on a toothpick, his eyes scanning her up and down with a look that wasn't just dismissive, it was bored. "I am not looking for the gift shop, Chief," Molly said, her voice dropping into a register that was calm, flat, and devoid of the nervous energy civilians usually projected in this kind of environment. The chief smirked, glancing over his shoulder at 2 other sailors who were leaning against the back wall, their arms crossed. They snickered. "Well, you're definitely lost," the chief said, stepping down 1 tier so he loomed slightly over her. "This is a closed briefing for special warfare personnel, Tier 1 assets and support only. That means no spouses, no girlfriends, and definitely no tourists wandering in off the street because they got turned around looking for the commissary." Molly turned back to the table at the front of the room. She placed her leather messenger bag on the surface. "I am aware of the briefing schedule." The chief's amusement curdled into irritation. He didn't like being ignored, especially not by a civilian woman in a bright blue shirt who looked like she belonged at a coffee shop rather than a pre-deployment intel brief. He stepped down to the floor level, closing the distance between them. "Hey, I am talking to you," he barked, moving to block her path to the podium. "You need to grab your bag and clear the deck. Now, we have an O5 coming in here in 10 minutes to discuss operational security in hostile theaters. We don't need you lingering around taking selfies for your Instagram." Molly looked up at him. She was 5'7", but the chief had at least 6 inches on her. Despite the size difference, she didn't retreat. She held her ground, her blue eyes locking onto his with a frightening intensity. "I am not taking selfies," she said. "And if you are worried about operational security, you might want to lower your voice before you announce the commanding officer's arrival to the entire hallway." The audacity of the comment seemed to stun him for a second. The room, which had been buzzing with the pre-briefing chatter of about 40 men, began to quiet down. Eyes turned toward the front. It wasn't every day a civilian woman talked back to a SEAL chief on his own turf. The chief took the toothpick out of his mouth and pointed it at her. "Listen, lady, I don't know who you think you are or whose wife you might be, but that creates 0 leverage with me. This is my house. You are a guest and an uninvited one at that. And frankly, your appearance is a distraction." He gestured vaguely at her arms. "Why all the ink, ma'am?" he asked, the honorific dripping with sarcasm. "You trying to look tough? Because in this room, tough isn't something you paint on your skin at a strip mall parlor. It's earned. And looking at you, blonde hair, bright clothes, jewelry. I am guessing the hardest thing you have had to do is find a parking spot at the mall." Molly looked down at her left arm. The tattoo he was referencing was a complex topography map that wrapped around her ulna, fading into a series of dates and coordinates near her wrist. To the uninitiated, it looked like abstract art. She felt a phantom sensation, a sudden spike of adrenaline and the smell of cordite, the memory of heat so intense it felt like it was melting the rubber soles of her boots. The ink wasn't paint. It was a scar disguised as art. It was the only way she could carry the geography of the Petch River Valley with her without screaming every time she closed her eyes. She looked back up at the chief. "The ink is personal," she said quietly. "Yeah, well, it's unprofessional," the chief countered, crossing his arms. "And it screams, pay attention to me. We don't do that here. We value quiet professionals. So I am going to ask you one last time nicely before I call security forces to have you escorted out for trespassing. Grab your bag, walk out those double doors. Go find the gift shop, buy a t-shirt if you want to support the troops, but get out of my briefing room." The room was silent now. 40 pairs of eyes were fixed on the confrontation. Some looked amused, others indifferent. A few looked uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. The hierarchy was clear. The chief ran the room until the commander arrived. Molly didn't move. She reached into her bag. "Don't reach for anything," the chief snapped, his hand instinctively twitching toward his belt, though he wasn't armed in the briefing room. It was a reflex born of combat, misapplied to a woman in a lecture hall. Molly froze, her hand halfway into the leather satchel. "I am reaching for my credentials, Chief. We don't need to see your dependent ID," he sneered. "It is not a dependent ID," she said, her voice hardening. The doors at the back of the lecture hall opened. The sudden influx of light and air broke the vacuum of tension for a split second. A lieutenant junior grade walked in carrying a stack of handouts. He stopped, sensing the atmosphere immediately. He looked from the chief, who was red-faced and aggressive, to the woman in the royal blue top standing motionless by the podium. The lieutenant's eyes widened. He squinted, looking at the woman, then at the tattoos on her arms. He had seen photos, grainy, classified photos from a joint task force debriefing 2 years ago. He looked at the chief, panic rising in his chest. "Chief Miller," the lieutenant called out, his voice cracking slightly. "Not now, sir," Miller said without turning around. "I am handling a security breach." "Chief, that's not—" The lieutenant started, stepping forward. "I said I have got it," Miller barked, asserting his enlisted authority over the junior officer in a way that only senior chiefs could get away with. He turned back to Molly. "You are disrupting military operations. If you don't leave in 5 seconds, I am physically removing you." Molly withdrew her hand from the bag slowly. She wasn't holding an ID card. She was holding a flash drive. "I need to load the slide deck," she said. "That's it," Miller grunted. He reached out, his heavy hand clamping onto her upper arm, his fingers digging into the blue fabric, right over the tattoo of the topographic map. The contact was electric. Molly didn't pull away, but her body went rigid. The sensation of being grabbed brought a flash of a different memory. A hand grabbing her vest, dragging her behind a crumbling mud wall as rounds chewed up the dirt where she had been standing. The weight of a wounded man, the slickness of blood, the screaming. "Take your hand off me," Molly said. Her voice was no longer the voice of a civilian. It was the command voice of someone who had directed fire support over a radio while bullets snapped past her head. Miller blinked, surprised by the tone. It wasn't fear. It was a warning. "Or what?" Miller challenged, though his grip loosened slightly. "You going to file a complaint with the spouses club?" The back doors swung open again. This time it wasn't a junior officer. The room snapped to attention before the first boot even hit the linoleum. "Attention on deck," someone shouted from the back. The shuffle of 40 men jumping to their feet was thunderous. Chairs scraped, boots stomped. Chief Miller, conditioned by 2 decades of service, released Molly's arm instantly and snapped to the position of attention, facing the front, his eyes locked on the wall. Molly stood still. She didn't snap to attention. She simply adjusted her sleeve where Miller had grabbed her, smoothing the royal blue fabric over the ink. Walking down the center aisle was Captain Harrison, the commanding officer of the SEAL team. Flanking him were the Command Master Chief and a woman in a Navy dress uniform with the rank of commander. The entourage moved with a sense of purpose that sucked the oxygen out of the room. Captain Harrison didn't stop at the first row. He walked straight to the podium, his face grim. He looked at Chief Miller, who was standing rigid, sweating slightly. Then he looked at Molly. The silence stretched, agonizing and heavy. Captain Harrison stopped 3 feet from Molly. He looked at her, then he looked at the screen, which was still blank. "I apologize for the delay, Captain," Molly said, her voice conversational. "I was having some trouble accessing the equipment." Harrison turned his head slowly to look at Chief Miller. "Chief, why is the guest speaker's laptop not connected?" Miller's eyes widened, staring straight ahead. "Guest speaker, sir." "The guest speaker. The subject matter expert we flew in from D.C. specifically for this briefing." Miller swallowed hard. "Sir, I assumed she was unauthorized personnel. She didn't have a badge displayed. And, Harrison prompted, his voice dropping an octave. "She didn't fit the profile, sir." Harrison let out a short, sharp breath through his nose. He turned back to Molly. "Molly, are you all right?" "I am fine, Jim," she said. The use of the captain's first name sent a ripple of shock through the room. The men in the audience exchanged glances. Who was this woman? Captain Harrison turned to face the room. He didn't take the podium. He stood next to Molly, creating a visual barrier between her and the chief. "Take your seats," Harrison ordered. The room sat. The sound of 40 men sitting was significantly quieter than the sound of them standing. Captain Harrison gestured to the woman in blue. "For those of you who haven't read the briefing packet because you were too busy assuming you already knew everything, this is Miss Molly Peters." He paused, letting the name hang in the air. "Some of you might simply see a civilian," Harrison continued, his eyes drilling into Chief Miller. You might see a woman with blonde hair and tattoos and assume she is lost. That is your first mistake, and in our line of work, first mistakes are often last mistakes. Harrison walked over to the side of the podium and plugged in the HDMI cable that Miller had blocked Molly from reaching. The projector hummed to life. A title slide appeared on the massive screen behind them. Cultural Intelligence in Asymmetric Warfare in the Petch River Valley, a case study. Harrison looked at the audience. Miss Peters is not a spouse. She is not a tourist. For 5 years, she served as a lead cultural support team specialist attached to Special Operations Task Forces in Afghanistan. She has more time outside the wire than half the people in this room combined. He looked at Miller. And as for the ink that the chief here seemed so concerned about, Harrison nodded to Molly. Molly stepped forward. She didn't look triumphant. She looked tired but strong. She rolled her sleeves up further, past her elbows, revealing the full extent of the tattoos. She looked at Miller. You asked why all the ink, Chief. You said tough isn't painted on at a strip mall. You're right. She raised her left arm, tracing the jagged dark line of the topographic map she had looked at earlier. This isn't decoration, she told the room, her voice projecting to the back row without a microphone. This is the Korengal. This specific line is the ridge where Viper Company took fire for 6 hours. I was attached to the ODA team supporting them. She pointed to a small black star inked near the wrist. This represents Master Sergeant Davis. He died while we were treating a local national family caught in the crossfire. I was the one holding pressure on his femoral artery while returning fire with his M4 because his team was suppressed. The room was dead silent. You could hear the hum of the projector fan. She held up her right arm. This sleeve is different. It's script interwoven with floral patterns that look pretty from a distance. But if you read Pashto, you know these are the names of the Afghan women who risked their lives to feed us intel on Taliban IED networks. 3 of them were executed because they were seen talking to me. I wear their names so I don't forget that the cost of my job wasn't just paid by Americans. She looked directly at Miller. I get tattooed after every deployment, she said. Not to look tough, but because when I came home I couldn't look at my own skin without seeing the blood of my friends on it. The ink covers the memories I can't wash off. It's a map of where I have been, and a list of who I failed to bring home. She lowered her arms. So, Chief, to answer your question, I have the ink because I earned the right to decide how I carry my history. And I wear this royal blue shirt because for 3 years I wore 40 pounds of kit and sweated through camis just like you. And now I choose to wear whatever color I damn well please. Chief Miller looked like he wanted to vanish into the floor tiles. His face was a mask of shame. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Captain Harrison stepped back in. Chief Miller, Harrison said coldly. Yes, sir. You are relieved of this briefing. You will report to the Master Chief's office, and you will wait there until I am done here. Aye, sir. Miller grabbed his cover. He had to walk past Molly to get to the door. He paused for a fraction of a second, his eyes meeting hers. The arrogance was gone. In its place was a realization of just how badly he had misread the situation. He nodded a short, jerky motion of contrition and walked out. The double doors swung shut behind him with a finality that echoed in the room. Captain Harrison turned back to the audience. Miss Peters is here to teach you how to navigate environments where kinetic force isn't the answer. She is here to teach you how to see things you are trained to ignore. Apparently that lesson is already started. He gestured to the podium. The floor is yours, Molly. Molly moved to the center of the stage. She didn't hide behind the podium. She stood exposed, her blue shirt bright against the screen. Her tattooed arms relaxed at her sides. She looked at the faces of the young operators. They weren't sneering anymore. They were leaning forward. They were looking at the map on her arm, trying to read the terrain. They were looking at her not as a woman or a civilian, but as a repository of survival data. Open your notebooks, Molly said. The sound of Velcro ripping and pens clicking filled the room. We are going to talk about the difference between looking and seeing, she began. Chief Miller looked at me and saw a girl at the mall. He didn't see the calluses on my hands from fast roping. He didn't see the way I checked the exits when I walked in. He saw what he expected to see, not what was actually there. In the field, that kind of bias gets you killed. She clicked a button on the remote. The screen changed to a photo of a crowded market in Kandahar. Tell me what you see, she asked. A hand went up in the back. Molly smiled, a small genuine smile. Go ahead, she said. For the next hour she dissected their world. She spoke their language, acronyms, grid references, tactical movements, but she added a layer they lacked. She talked about the human terrain. She described how to read the body language of a village elder, how to spot the difference between fear and aggression in a local woman's eyes. Midway through the lecture, she paused on a slide showing a medevac helicopter lifting off in a cloud of dust. "This was Operation Hammer Down," she said. The room went still again. Everyone knew Hammer Down. It was a legendarily bad day in the valley. "I was on the ground for this," Molly said. She unconsciously rubbed her right forearm. "We were pinned in a wadi. We had 4 wounded. The birds couldn't land because of the RPG fire." The flashback hit her again, but this time she used it. She described the heat, the grit, the sound of the distinct snap hiss of rounds passing close. She described how she had to negotiate with a local shepherd to use his mules to move the wounded to a secondary LZ, all while under fire, using a dialect of Pashto that only she and the village elder spoke. "It wasn't my rifle that saved those men," she said softly. "It was my words. It was the fact that I had spent 3 months drinking tea with that shepherd's wife, treating her children for dysentery. That relationship bought us the mules. The mules got the wounded to the LZ. The LZ got them home." She looked at the young men. "You are all hammers," she said, "and you are very good at being hammers. But if you treat every problem like a nail, you will break everything you touch. Sometimes you need to be the water." When she finished, there was no applause initially, just a heavy, respectful silence. Then, slowly, the lieutenant in the front row, the one who had tried to warn Miller, began to clap. The others joined in. It wasn't polite applause. It was the heavy, rhythmic clapping of men who had just been given a survival tool they didn't know they needed. Molly nodded, acknowledging them. She began to pack up her laptop. The room cleared out slowly. Several of the SEALs hung back, waiting for a chance to speak to her. They approached respectfully, asking specific questions about the tribal dynamics in the regions they were deploying to, or asking about the dialect she had mentioned. The last to leave was the lieutenant. He waited until the others were gone. "Ma'am," he said. Molly looked up, zipping her bag. "Just Molly, Lieutenant. Molly, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry about Chief Miller. He's old school. He was protecting his team," Molly said. "I can respect the instinct. It was just the target identification that was off." The lieutenant smiled. "I think he learned his lesson." "I hope so," Molly said. As she walked out of the lecture hall, Captain Harrison was waiting for her in the corridor. He handed her a bottle of water. "You crushed it," he said. "I had good material," she replied, taking the water. Harrison walked with her toward the exit. "Miller is in my office. Do you want to see him?" Molly stopped. She thought about the embarrassment on the chief's face. She thought about the arrogance, but also the underlying drive to secure the perimeter. "No," she said. "He doesn't need me to pile on. You handle him. But Jim, yeah, make sure he knows that the offer stands. If he wants to know the story behind the rest of the ink, he can ask, but he has to ask respectfully." "I will tell him," Harrison promised. They reached the heavy glass doors of the building. The sun outside was blindingly bright compared to the dim lecture hall. "One more thing," Harrison said. Molly turned. "That royal blue shirt," he said, grinning. "It really does stand out." Molly laughed. "That's the point, sir. I'm done hiding in the camouflage." She pushed the doors open and walked out into the sunlight. She walked past the rows of gray Navy sedans, past the formations of jogging sailors chanting cadence. As she walked, she rolled her sleeves down, covering the maps and the names. They were for her, after all. The world didn't need to see them to know she was strong. She just needed to know they were there. But as she reached her car, she saw a figure standing by the hood. It was Chief Miller. He wasn't wearing his cover. He was holding it in his hands, turning it over and over. When he saw her, he straightened up. He looked uncomfortable, stripped of his bravado. "Miss Peters," he said. "Chief," Molly said, stopping a few feet away. "I wanted to apologize," he said. His voice was rough. "I was out of line. Way out of line. I made assumptions I shouldn't have made." Molly studied him. He looked like a man who had just taken a rigorous moral inventory and came up short. "You were guarding the gate, Chief," Molly said. "I get it." "No," Miller shook his head. "It wasn't just that. I saw the ink and I judged you. I thought you thought I was someone who didn't know the cost," Molly finished for him. Miller nodded. "Yeah, and I was wrong. I heard the end of your brief from the hallway. Operation Hammer Down." Molly nodded. "I had a buddy in that valley," Miller said quietly. "A comms guy. He made it out. He said a female Terp saved their asses. I never knew her name." Molly didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Miller looked at her arms, now covered by the blue fabric. "I guess I just wanted to say, thank you, for him, and for the lesson today." Molly unlocked her car. "You're welcome, Chief." She opened the door and tossed her bag in. Before she got in, she looked back at him. And Miller, "Yes, ma'am? Next time you see a woman in a bright blue shirt, check the eyes before you check the clothes. The eyes always tell you who has been to the show." Miller met her gaze. He saw it then, the 1,000-yard stare buried deep behind the blue irises, the steel that only comes from walking through fire. "Understood, ma'am," he said. He threw her a salute. It wasn't a mandatory salute for an officer. It was the salute one warrior gives another. Molly didn't salute back. She was a civilian now, and she respected the protocols. She simply nodded, a slow dip of her chin. She got into the car, started the engine, and drove toward the gate. She checked her rearview mirror. Miller was still standing there, watching her go. She turned on the radio. Music filled the car, washing away the tension of the briefing room. She glanced down at her wrist, where the cuff of her shirt had ridden up slightly, exposing the small black star. "We made them listen, Davis," she thought. "We made them see." She drove past the gift shop, past the headquarters, and out through the main gate, merging into the civilian traffic. To the passing cars, she was just a woman in a blue shirt driving a sedan, an unassuming figure in the daily commute. But underneath the blue silk, the map of the valley was still there, etched into her skin, a permanent reminder that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes, they wear ink. Molly smiled, turned up the volume, and drove home. If Molly's story reminded you that valor doesn't always fit the mold we expect, hit that like button. It helps us share these stories with more people, and if you want to support our mission to honor the women who have served in the shadows and the light, please subscribe to She Chose Valor. We have more stories of unassuming heroes coming your way. Thank you for watching.